And welcome on into the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malamud here with you, along with Zach Malamud. Zach, we are here in Week 8. We are ready to roll here.
Yeah, Brett, exciting stuff in Week 8. It's crazy how quickly this season is flying by right now. But a lot of good news this past week, a lot of bad news as well. So let's get into it.
Yeah, let's jump right into it. Before that, subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Give us a thumbs up. We've been going week to week on our previews, though, for the Dynasty community. We have a lot of rookies that seem to be coming about, and make sure you check out some of the episodes from earlier as we did our rookie draft preview and things like that to get all the insight on some of those guys looking from the longer term point of view. But Zach, let's start right now in Kansas City as DeAndre Hopkins has officially joined the Kansas City Chiefs. They make the deal official today, mid-round pick swap, and looks like they're going to get some salary paid for them as well. And that was sort of what the Chiefs were looking for, wide receiver. But finally, they have what is going to be their clear number one wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. What do you think the initial impact will be?
Yeah, it gives them a Rashee Rice type of backup, I would say. In DeAndre Hopkins, it's crazy to say that Hopkins could be a backup, but with how the last couple of years have gone in Tennessee, it looks like that he even himself has just lost a little bit from that top form that he had in all those years in Houston, then Arizona. Then he went to Tennessee, and it's kind of all gone downhill for Hopkins, who's, just a couple of years ago, one of the top wide receivers in the NFL. I think this is a great move for Hopkins and his fantasy value, considering all the losses that the Chiefs have had in this offense so far this season. Rashee Rice, obviously out for the year. Pacheco, probably not going to be rushed back anytime soon. It seems that Travis Kelce is kind of leading the way. They got Kareem Hunt, obviously, at running back right now for Kansas City. But after that, they're kind of looking for that third option, Brett, for Patrick Mahomes, and DeAndre Hopkins fits that perfectly. I think when you give the defense another dimension to really look at, when you look at this offense, they kind of have everything there. And Xavier Worthy's young, really hasn't lived up to his full expectations yet, but it's only week 8 now in his rookie year, so you can't expect too much from the young guy out of Texas. And then you bring in Hopkins, who can help a guy like Worthy, but also be that possession type wide receiver, like I mentioned. So a really good trade for the Chiefs. They 100% needed a wide receiver, and a great move for Hopkins, and his fantasy value is a bit higher than it was when it was in Tennessee. Obviously a big lull period in the start of this season.
Yeah, so let's break it down here because I like to talk dynasty. He's 32 years old. He has been dealing with foot injuries, leg injuries. That all up and down his life. He's been dealing with injuries for the last few years now. It almost reminds me like of a Julio Jones, where the talent was there, but the leg just kind of couldn't keep up down the stretch of his career. So I feel like his value isn't so high. We saw him get swapped with a second-round pick for a first-round pick in our league. I thought that was a crazy trade just off the bat. And it involved pick swap, so you sort of are playing that game. I don't know that his value is that high, though, even though he will be the number one wide receiver in this offense, competing probably with Travis Kelce for those weekly targets. And yeah, I think that over the season, like this season alone, yeah, he might have like flex appeal, I would say, but I'm not sure that I really see the upper echelon of him being, this high-end wide receiver 2. Now, listen, he could creep into wide receiver 2 numbers if he's getting in the end zone and things like that. But, I'm not sure how many targets. This isn't going to be like a Cooper Kupp situation where they only throw to one or two guys. Patrick Mahomes has still done a very good job of spreading the ball around. It's really hurt his fantasy value quite a bit. So I just think, listen, bringing in Hopkins, obviously great talent, I just think that as far as the total upside, I still think there's a ceiling, and it really just comes down to his injuries. That said, from the redraft standpoint, I think there is a lot of flex appeal with this. I think that this is going to be one of those go for it seasons. They're going for the three-peat. I'm not going out and trading the world to go get him the way that I can see some people going in and trying to get him. I think that as far as this week, listen, it's too short to even say it's already Thursday night. Like, he probably will, if he does play, be on a very limited snap count just to get him out there. So I'm sitting him this week. You already do own him. You're happy, and you're probably going to play him down the stretch of the season, but I wouldn't do it this week.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. I think when you look at Hopkins' true value, you're probably plugging him in as like in the 40s this week in terms of redraft. Like, he's just in that range. Him and Worthy, I mean, the both of them are right around there. I think this more, you look at it, yes, I said Hopkins is going to be the possession wide receiver. That doesn't mean he's going to be the main possession guy. I still think Travis Kelce is getting 9-10 targets a game here, Brett. I really do. I think he's going to get peppered with targets, and they're going to force a defense to focus around Kelce to open up the other options. It all starts with Travis Kelce, though. It's not going to start with DeAndre Hopkins like it did with a guy like Rashee Rice at the beginning of the year. I look at Hopkins and going to have solid enough value. I also think this week, like you said, it's more, I got to see it before I believe it and really know how to rank him. I think this week could tell a little bit, but I think even the next couple of weeks, you're really going to figure out what DeAndre Hopkins' true role is in this offense, where they're going to him. Maybe it's in the red zone, maybe it's short yardage, kind of what they're expecting out of Hopkins. But a really, really top-notch wide receiver and talent-wise in the NFL, and definitely a good grab for Kansas City.
All right, so let's jump right into the next piece of news. As we talked dynasty-wise, a guy who's definitely been on the dynasty radar for the last few years is former first-round pick Jameson Williams, who was suspended earlier today officially for 2 games for violating the performance-enhancing substances policy. Zach, listen, it's only 2 games, so I'm not sure that it's going to be too much as far as the redraft impact. But from the dynasty community, this is just awful news that he has been suspended again. This is coming after the gambling suspension last year. This is obviously coming after being injured the previous year, and this guy just can't catch a break.
Yeah, I mean, you even texted after it happened. It was more of like, this guy just can't stay out of his own way. Like, it just something is going on, and he just cannot catch a break, like you said. So when you look at overall, I mean, yeah, it's 2 games, so it's not something to freak out about. But as a dynasty owner, if you have Jameson Williams, I wouldn't all of a sudden be like, oh, throw it away and trade him. No, but he is a guy that you're going to have to monitor and see what's going on. I mean, we've looked at a number of guys in the past that have gone through a couple of stuff. Even a guy like this past offseason, Jordan Addison, like a guy that I have who just early in his career has gone through some stuff already. Like, it's not the same as Jameson Williams, but even so, like, there's guys that just have to learn and they'll kind of get through their problems in the end. I think when you look at Jameson Williams, though, like, he is a solid dynasty piece, of course, and just has to be smart. And I think the guys up in Detroit will definitely help him out. Just really not getting into a lot of trouble like he has been.
Yeah, listen, I mean, it was the 12th pick of the draft, so the talent obviously is there. It's just about, can you just behave yourself and put it all together on the field? And that's kind of been tough for him. And yeah, I mean, obviously the injury doesn't help too. He missed 11 games in his rookie year, and then kind of had to get up to speed in the last couple games of the season where he was very sparsely used. And missed training camp with the gambling incident last year. Now, obviously, 2-game suspension here, and he's away again from the team. I just listen. I personally like I had him in a dynasty, and I got rid of him last year. I figured out a way to upgrade him into a quarterback, which I then upgraded into a Malik Neighbors pick. That's my suggestion. Use him as a piece while he is still young, while he still has value, as part of a trade. You're not going to get a lot for him. However, if you package him with something, I think that that's sort of the name of the game. So, yeah, listen, I think that he's a great player. I don't know if he'll ever put it together. If that breakout will ever really come the way that it seemed like it might. Just at the beginning of the season, you had those couple big games, and it was like, oh well, this is the guy that they wanted. Yeah, I don't know. I just there's too much going on with him, and yeah, like I said to you the other day, like he just can't get out of his own way, and then basically put out a statement saying it was a complete surprise and I'm not trying to cheat and all of these things. But then why do you keep violating the rules, man?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a frustrating situation, but hopefully, like you said, you could figure it out in the end and get back to football.
What's your thoughts as far as like dynasty? Are you holding him or looking to sell him? Like, what do you think if you were an owner of him?
I think it's more of what you said. It's more of just building on a package and just rolling with that once you can get the value from him, because you're not going to get tip top value. You're not going to get a first round pick for Jameson Williams. It's not going to happen. But if you can piece things together, like you said, or you just end up holding them and see how things go. I do think, Brett, like in this offense that they have, like he could be a key piece like in the future. Like we've seen it to start this year that even though Amon-Ra didn't get as much targets as he wanted early, Laporta hasn't lived up to the hype just yet. This season, I think you look at Jameson Williams and say, wow, all right, he's looked pretty good. Like they're giving him targets. He's lightning quick and can get into space. And when he does get into space, he's freakishly talented and will put up a lot of fantasy points. But there comes the other stuff of the stuff off the field. And if that's not something to really sit through and you don't want to sit through that, then yeah, you could piece up some trades in the end.
All right, so jumping into our next piece of news here, Chris Godwin has been ruled out for the season, a dislocated ankle. Just an awful scene, really. And it came down the stretch of the game there. It seemed like the game was kind of out of reach. Todd Bowles defending the move. And I think that, listen, there still was a chance that they could have scored a touchdown, got an onside kick, and then went out and tried to win the game. And so I'm with Todd Bowles. I don't know that there would have been a reason to just quote unquote give up at that spot when you have the ball and you're only down a couple possessions, down late. Like we saw the Jets last year come back on the Browns. Like there was that, that game. I just think like, listen, Chris Godwin's impact being out for the year, it sucks. It just sucks. He was like wide receiver 2 as far as redraft fantasy PPR points. And so it just sucks when you see a top 5 guy like that having just the best year of his career, and it ends sort of in just this awful way. And now it's this big long recovery back. That said, listen, we have to break it down as far as the value goes. If you have Godwin, you're holding him. Like the talent is still there. He's still going to be there. Baker's still going to be there. They say that he's a free agent and all that. I can see him going back there though, and kind of be a lifer over in Tampa. As far as it goes with the fill-in here, I really think that while Mike Evans is still dealing with a hamstring injury, Jalen McMillan becomes a must-add in every league. But that said, I think that it really comes down to where they use him, because McMillan was really, really good in the slot throughout college, throughout working with, a guy like Michael Penix who was able to find him in open space. And I think that if they use him in the slot, I'm in on him. Like I have him in Dynasty, but I'd be in on him on a redraft standpoint if they start using this guy in the slot, because I think that that's where the most talent comes. And sort of his knock was, getting open on the outside. And he was able to somewhat do it in those easier games, I should say, for Washington. But really, when they started facing tougher competition, they really needed to get him the ball over the middle, try to beat linebackers, beat the nickel safety, beat the nickel corner. And he was able to do that pretty well. So yeah, I think that it's sort of a wait and see game with Jalen McMillan. But it really just comes to, you got to add him and just stash him.
Yeah, a lot of J's here, Brett. But I think when you look at Jalen McMillan, you said putting him in the slot, and I think that's going to happen based on when he was on the outside. There was a guy named Chris Godwin in the middle. And obviously, Chris Godwin in the slot there, he's not going to be there anymore. So I think when you look at Jalen McMillan, he's going to be probably in his best position in the slot. I think that'll help him out. I do think, Brett, that Cade Otton gets a huge raise here and a like almost a must start in redraft at tight end. Like if you're, there's a lot of teams that are really like struggling to find tight ends. I think Cade Otton could be like a top 5 option. I think this is a team that passes the ball a ton. And yes, they're going to rely on the running backs as well. Rachaad White, one of those guys. Of course, they have the 3-man backfield, Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving there as well. But like when you look at this offense, they want to throw it. They want Baker to sling the ball around. And for that reason, I think he's going to go to the guy that he knows best to start, and that is Cade Otton in this offense. And I think when you look at Cade Otton's production just recently, he's been really, really good. And that's been with Evans and Godwin both on the field. So now Otton gets a solid time without those guys. I think they're going to pepper the tight end with targets and figure things out through the run game. I do think Jalen McMillan, I agree with you, is a must-add in redraft right now, just because he is the number one and he is going to get a specific target share. But I'd say in terms of passing options, I'd go Cade Otton number 1 and Jalen McMillan number 2, and probably you'd go a Trey Palmer or a Sterling Shepard mixed in at number 3. That's pretty much it. And I think this is also a team that they could rely on their run game a little bit more. Obviously, they're the lack of trust maybe in some of those weapons. However, they're going to want Baker to throw the ball around. That's going to be how they win games. Their defense not really the strongest in football, and they're going to have to put up points in a lot of weeks this year, Brett.
Yeah, listen, I've seen a lot of Sterling Shepard get added, and I don't disagree with it. Todd Bowles has always liked his veterans, and that was thing. And obviously us up here in New York, we got to see that firsthand where it was okay, the vets are getting the start over the rookies and the second-year players. So yeah, I could see, Shepard working into the snap share quite a bit, but at the same time, I'm not sure how much upside there is the way that I see it with McMillan.
Yeah, definitely fair.
All right, so let's jump into our standouts here, Zach. Let's start out with Jahmyr Gibbs, who had an awesome performance, 15 carries, 116 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Also caught 4 balls for 44 yards to finish with 32 standard PPR points. Zach Gibbs, I think, is just – listen, he's a solid guy. You're starting him every week. I don't think anything really changes. Obviously, we saw David Montgomery kind of go down with a knee injury. So maybe this week we just see a little bit more towards Gibbs and a little bit less towards Montgomery. But Montgomery was out there practicing no problem. So, I'm not sure how much of an uptick there's going to be.
Yeah, Brett. I mean, when you look at it overall, I think Gibbs kind of just needed a game like this. We've seen a lot of David Montgomery, and rightfully so. He's been really, really strong so far this year. However, it took a little bit away from Jahmyr Gibbs, and he still through that time was able to put up a ton of fantasy points. But then he comes into this week. They're going up against a very tough Minnesota defense, and he just goes to school on them for 32 fantasy points. And I think the yards per attempt really tells you how much burst Jahmyr Gibbs has right now. He had 7.7 yards per attempt on the ground, Brett. I mean, just ridiculous against one of the top defenses in the NFL. But I think also that when you look at his work in the receiving game, got those 4 receptions as well, plus got into the end zone twice on the ground. Like everything about it screams, all right, yeah, he's normal and doing just fine, even though the points had a bit of a cap on the upside based on how Montgomery had been playing. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs is still there and doing very well. So heading into the next couple of weeks, a little bit of a tough kind of matchup against Tennessee this week. But even so, like if Montgomery does not get the same workload, like Jahmyr Gibbs could be really, really strong. Obviously a must start every single week in every league, bro.
Yeah, totally agree on that front. Let's go to the passing game right now as our next standout is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Zach, another huge performance for Amon-Ra. Touchdowns now in 4 straight games. He had 8 catches for 112 yards and a score to finish with 25.2 standard PPR points. Zach, I think that, the number one, the streak of touchdowns is awesome. Straight. I think that, him going into this matchup now against Tennessee actually could be a really big one for him, especially now with Jameson Williams not being there.
Yeah, 100%, Brett. And I think when you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown so far this season, it's just been a little bit on and off. You got a really bad week 1 that turned into a great weeks 2, 3, and 4, excuse me. Then they go to the bye. And then after that, I mean, they're looking for him. That's a touchdown in 4 straight games, Brett. I mean, when they get to the red zone, they got a lot of options. There's a lot of mouths to feed, but they're going to their top guy in Amon-Ra St. Brown. And to see that he's getting those touchdown looks, those looks in the red zone, really, really encouraging sight that he is at the top level when it comes to wide receivers. He's going to be one of the top guys for the rest of the season, as long as this Detroit offense really keeps on rolling. I mean, another really strong week, 8 receptions, 112 yards, and a score, like you said. But he's also just making something out of nothing on plays, but also getting a little bit of deeper looks. I mean, 14 yards per reception in this one, like great stuff to see for a wide receiver that you see more as a possession type of guy. He's making a lot more out of his touches. So that's a really good sign heading into the rest of this season.
All right, so jumping into our last standout from the week, Rachaad White, who had what was, listen, I think that it was more of the superpower from the air that really pushed him over the top. He had only 10 carries for 40 yards as Bucky Irving kind of eked into the carries. But it was the catches for 71 yards and 2 touchdowns that put him at 29.1 standard PPR points. Zach, I think that this really proved the value here of Rachaad White and why you got to continue to start this guy every week, even with the other 2 guys there, Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving.
Yeah, Brett, there was a very specific reason why I ended up choosing this one. When we look at Saquon Barkley, you could say all you want, and he had revenge on the Giants. We could get to that another time. Saquon's really good at football. When you look at Rachaad White and the situation in Tampa Bay now, I mean, they're going to be passing. They have to throw the ball. They're going to rely on Baker Mayfield to sling the ball around. They also are down weapons, so that means that some guys have to step up. I think Rachaad White in the passing game is the best thing that they have out of the backfield, Brett. So when you look at that, the 6 receptions, 71 yards, 2 scores. Yeah, he got 10 carries for 40 yards, but I'm looking at the passing game, the targets, as well as the yards that he made out of that. I think when you look at that, plus the 2 scores in the end, that's a good sign for Rachaad White owners who were not feeling very good after Bucky Irving started to eke into the workload of White. When you look at White now, though, they're down options, so they're going to have to give the ball to somebody. I think Rachaad White, as a passing option out of the backfield, really flexes out his PPR value, Brett.
Yeah, I just think, listen, like you said, now we kind of have to pass the ball if we're Baker Mayfield and try to get the ball downfield quickly. It's why I just talked about Jalen McMillan, because there's going to have to be some sort of that's form all season. Listen, the whole Bucky Irving thing, the last couple weeks, that kind of eked into the game plan a little bit per se. But yeah, I think that they're still going to have to factor in Rashad and his passing ability. It's almost like that Alvin Kamara, like the cheapies, and it's those free points that we say in PPR league. I feel like Rachaad White has proven that he's going to be able to do that. And obviously, if Mike Evans can't go either this week, look for a lot of like checkdowns from Baker. And those are going to be going to Cade Otton, and they're going to be going to Rachaad White. And so those guys stuck up for me.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, Zach, so let's jump right into our game previews here. We start out tonight in Los Angeles, Minnesota, taking on the Rams, 8:15. I think it's a big game here for the Rams in the future, and we talked a little bit off stream about this, about the future of Cooper Kupp and whether he's going to get traded or not. Puka Nacua has been activated from IR. So what is your outlook here on the Rams team?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that, they're bringing back Cooper Kupp already. That's confirmed, and they may be bringing back Puka Nacua. Not completely confirmed yet. He's still questionable, but looks like he's going to be on the field tonight. I don't expect too much out of Puka, Brett. I think it's more of a all right, get him back on the field, see how he's doing, and look for some progress there. But I think they're going to really go for Cooper Kupp tonight. They saw what the Minnesota, looking at Minnesota, their defense did against Detroit, Brett. When you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, who we talked about a moment ago, the running game as well, they really attacked this Minnesota defense. And I think the Rams have a game plan to take advantage of that. And the top two guys, Kyren Williams as well as Cooper Kupp, when you look at those two guys, it could be a real solid week for both of those. I think when you look at that overall, it outweighs, Puka Nacua is going to get probably a couple targets, but I also think the limited snaps here, I don't know if I could completely put him in a lineup this week. I know there's people that are desperate, but just wouldn't be me.
Yeah, it wouldn't be me either. I think that I'm a little scared as a Puka Nacua owner of putting him in my lineup. And it kind of just sort of depends on where your situation is. And if you're kind of desperate right now, then yeah, I guess you go for it. But I'm not going to be one of those teams. I'm keeping him on the bench. I think he's going to be on a snap count. And you just kind of are hoping he falls into the end zone on that limited snap share and limited snap count if you are starting him. That said, I think that Cooper Kupp is really going to get this showcase game tonight. And I said it to you before we went live. I just have this feeling he's going to get traded, and that's going to be the guy sort of testing the waters to see where Puka's at as far as his health and all of that. And if he's good, then they can feel confident that they're going to move forward with Puka as their guy. And if not, then they can hold on to Cooper Kupp. I just have this feeling that there's going to be some of those teams that are just going in on him, like a Tampa Bay, for example, that certainly is there. We also saw like the 49ers were mentioned, and I don't really agree with that one. I don't know that they're going to trade him in division, but it is a team that is still out there that could potentially pay a premium for him and can afford to do that as they kind of go for this championship run. That said, I think that Cooper Kupp becomes a must start tonight with him back. Kyren Williams, obviously, you're starting him. Matt Stafford, super flex option, I would say, this week as he finally can get back to, playing the game that he has with his weapons. And I'm kind of just staying out right now on Kobe Parkinson. He kind of was in, and then he was out, and then he was in, and I'm kind of back out on him. And so I'm kind of staying away from there. What's your feeling here on the Vikings?
Yeah, I mean, it's simple when it comes to the Vikings. I mean, they're going up against a defense that has looked very shaky so far this season. And yes, they've had some good games, but they've also had some really bad games. I think when you look at that, you're kind of going all in with your guys, and Sam Darnold being a super flex option. When you look at the rest of the guys, I think Hawkinson is still questionable, Brett, or still on a list. They're figuring it out. So not entirely sure if he's coming off that or not. But I think when you look at the rest of the guys, Jefferson, Aaron Jones, all going to be in your lineup, and probably Addison more of a flex play today against the Rams.
Yeah, I agree completely. Hawkinson just kind of depends on your lineup here, and it's a spot start for me. But I probably am waiting till he gets healthier. But yeah, starting all the rest of those guys. Sam Darnold right now is that borderline quarterback 1, quarterback 2. I'd probably put him in that lower range quarterback 1 in what could be a pretty good matchup for him.
Yeah, definitely fair.
All right, so let's jump and bounce around on Sunday. We start out with
go to a viewer question quickly.
Oh, look at that. We got a viewer question. So before we jump into that, let's get to Pareko. Welcome back, Pareko. Trade Mahomes plus Brees or Kyren for Daniels, Pollard, and Neighbors. So he'd be trading away Brees and Kyren Williams. Plus, Patrick Mahomes is sort of on a down low right now. But in exchange, he'd be getting back Jaden Daniels, who's battling a little bit of an injury right now. But he'd also get Neighbors and Pollard. Redraft Superflex. He also has Jefferson. Plus, he has Anthony Richardson and Jameson Williams.
It's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, I would say it could work out. I think when you look at the need at quarterback, of course, Jaden Daniels fits that perfectly. He's really the top guy to go for right now. I think when you're also getting Neighbors as well, it really, really fits in perfectly. I think when you had the choice, though, I kind of just go both ways on it, Brett. It's either Brees or Kyren. I'm a Kyren dynasty owner in every possible league. So I'm a little biased. We're also a bit of Jet fans here, Brett. So Brees Hall, I don't even know which one I'd really go for. Brett, what are you thinking? Which one?
Yeah, it's kind of a toss-up for me. I think that the fact that you have Anthony Richardson there kind of makes it a little bit riskier. And in my dynasty league, I have Mahomes and Richardson as my 2 quarterbacks. So I'm with you right now on the fact that Richardson and Mahomes, it's kind of a shaky little start here. I'm not sure how I feel about the Jaden Daniels injury. I kind of feel like they are leading on a little bit less than they should be. I think that there's a little bit more of an injury than they're leading on. That said, I think Malik Neighbors has been a stud. Pollard has been a stud. I think that, honestly, I would take the Mahomes side of this thing. And I just think it's really, really close. I just think that bringing in a wide receiver for the Chiefs might steady the ship a little bit more. Listen, Mahomes has been horrible to and I put horrible in air quotes to start the year, but the floor has still been there. Even in like a hard week, he still is getting 16, 17 points, which is kind of what you want out of that quarterback position. I'm more concerned with the Anthony Richardson side than I am with the Patrick Mahomes side. So I'm actually going to stick with the Mahomes, Brees, and Kyren here.
That's completely fair. I when I look at it, you can also say, all right, well, it's redraft super flex, so that kind of changes it a bit from dynasty. I think when you look at Brees or Kyren, I'll make a decision. I would take right now, based on the situation, give me Kyren Williams. I am a little biased, but I'm also a Jet fan, so we can go both ways there. I would take Kyren Williams and pair him with Jefferson in your lineup, plus Daniels, of course, you're adding. I think when you look at that, you get the quarterback in the end. And Jaden Daniels, even though he could be out for a couple weeks, I mean, the value is just insane right now of a guy who the rushing ability is there and a healthy week. The passing is there too. Like everything about it. I would say Brees would be the guy that I would trade with Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean it's fair. If you are in fact making this trade, I agree. I would trade Brees for Kyron. I think that the more upside is right now there for Kyron, and obviously Devontae Adams. I think it sort of changed my thinking on Brees as far as that goes. So yeah, I mean it kind of depends on where it's at. I wouldn't make the trade, but I'm a little more cautious when it comes to making trades. And yeah, it's redraft, so you're kind of going for it anyway. It's not like Anthony Richardson and you have him for the rest of time. But yeah, if you're gonna make that trade, I would Brees instead of Kyron.
Definitely fair.
All right, thank you, Pareko, for that question there, Zach. Let's jump right into the Ravens as we talk about Lamar Jackson, who is just an absolute animal. Derrick Henry, an absolute animal. I think you're just kind of starting your guys in this one, kind of like we said last week with the Ravens.
Yeah, 100%. I think when you look at Lamar and the pairing that he now has just with Derrick Henry, this offense is just on an absolute tear. When you pair those two guys together, the rushing ability and everything that they do in this offense, you don't even really need the passing game too much. You just rely on those two guys to get the job done. However, this past week, Brett, 5 passing touchdowns from Lamar Jackson. We never see that. Just crazy stuff from him. You're expecting maybe a ton on the ground and figure things out. 5 passing touchdowns. I think when you look at this matchup, it's a little bit tougher against Cleveland. Their secondary, although it hasn't been great this year, is still tougher than what is a Tampa secondary that he faced last week. However, you're starting those two guys, Henry and Lamar. Of course, I think when you look at the rest of the guys, Bateman is a flex option now, and Zay Flowers is probably in your lineup. Had a couple of rough weeks, but I still trust him as a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. And then when you look at the rest of the guys, Mark Andrews. I mean, we kind of waited, and then all of a sudden we've seen 2 straight weeks now. We're like, all right, well, is he back? He could be. I think when you look at the matchup, it's not easy this week. So I don't know. Let's say, I guess you got some options of like, let's say a David Njoku or another guy that's just like hanging around, a Jake Ferguson in there. I'd probably start them over Andrews this week based on the matchup. But the fact that we're coming down to now, all right, starting Andrews based on matchup, that is a lot of progress than we had in recent weeks. So very happy to see that he's kind of getting back to normal, Brett.
Yeah, I agree. I think that on the Brown side of things, the sky is kind of falling right now. I'm not sure how you guys actually starting. I think Nick Chubb probably is one of those flex options. He got in the end zone last week, and that was great. Njoku's probably the only real must start for me. I picked up Cedric Tillman because I think that the upside is sort of there. I haven't really seen it out of Jerry Jeudy. And I'm not sure I'm going to see it out of Elijah Moore after, his career here. And while I've seen Jameis get picked up, he's strictly a super flex option for me. Nothing more than that for right now until he kind of proves himself. So right now, the real only sure start is David Njoku.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And it was good to see Nick Chubb back. Great to see him get in the end zone. I mean, we talked about it last week, like what a story that he's even here. In terms of fantasy options, it's David Njoku all the way. And definitely a must start at tight end this week. I mean, he was drafted as a tight end 1, probably. Just the injuries kind of caught up to him in this first stretch. Other than that, though, he's a really, really solid option and the top guy to go to in this offense this week.
Before we get to the Green Bay Packer game, back to Pareka here, who says, I just think that Brees has an easier playoff schedule if I can even make the playoffs. I'm 2 games out right now.
Well, what I would say to Pareko there is you got to get in the playoffs to actually win in the
Yeah.
playoffs. So I think that's the more important thing. Yes, it could just even though it's a couple games, you got to get there. And if you get in there, then you cause the chaos. And I mean, with guys like Jefferson and Neighbors in the end, like you can make up with uh, even just a little bit of a downgrade based on matchup from Kyron Williams or Tony Pollard in the end. So when you look at just the roster overall, it definitely would be smarter in my mind for Brees. No, even looking at the easier playoff schedule, there's the positives and negatives to it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that the only real, when I look way ahead of the playoffs, guys that I'm always like looking at, trading for, I don't really take that into effect, except that maybe the defensive position where I kind of will stack down the stretch of the season and say, okay, well, who's in week 15? Who's in week 16? Who are the bad teams and who are they playing? And then go out and grab those defenses a couple weeks prior to the end of the season. I know that was quite the trend in our league last year, and it was like week 13, the teams that had already clinched, and there was like 6 or 7 defenses that had been claimed in that 1 week just because everybody was trying to go get the matchup. So, yeah, I don't really look at the matchups, though, outside of those defensive teams.
Yeah, definitely fair.
Thanks, Pareko, for the question. Let's get back into the matchups here. Green Bay Packers, they travel to Jacksonville Sunday at 1 o'clock. Zach, let's start out with the Packers here because Jordan Love's a good quarterback, and you're playing him, I think, no matter what, correct?
Yeah, you are. And how about the matchup this week? You get Jacksonville, who, yeah, they looked better last week, but even so, like, they're still Jacksonville, and they were playing New England. So that doesn't really tell you much. So when you look at all of that, Jordan Love is a top 5 option this week, Brett, against Jacksonville and the weak defense that they've had so far this year. I think when you look at the other stuff on this offense, and it's Josh Jacobs, Jaden Reed, who are really must starts in this game, both of them. And then you also look at a guy like Romeo Doubs, who has really stepped up, Brett, in the last couple of weeks and kind of solidified himself for now as the number 2 pass catcher in this offense, the number 2 wide receiver behind Jaden Reed. Obviously, there's the question of whether it's Doubs or Tucker Kraft being one of the top 2 pass catchers. But in the end, like you look at this offense, they're going to want to throw the ball. They throw the ball a lot, and they are going to do so on the road in Jacksonville this week against this defense that's just struggled mightily so far this season. I think all of those guys you're really starting and should be confident about them heading into this matchup.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, as far as Tank Bigsby goes and ETN, Tank Bigsby is really eating into the workload here. And so I think that for me, on the Jaguars side of things, that's where it kind of becomes interesting. Lawrence, you're kind of starting in the super flex spot here. ETN and Bigsby, I think you can start both of them, granted that they're both going to play. And, as far as the rest of them go, like Brian Thomas, I think has become quite a bit of a stud. And I could probably put him in the wide receiver 2 range right now. Evan Ingram, he's a tight end 1 for me. And so that's kind of where I fall in that team. Where do you find them?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when it comes to the running backs, they both kind of become flex options now. And it's crazy that we're saying that about Travis Etienne. But I think once he's got to get back to 100% healthy. That's the one part of it. But then you look at what Tank Bigsby has been able to do in the run game, something that Travis Etienne just hasn't been able to do. And they're going to probably continue to rely on Bigsby in the run game and rely on Etienne more in the passing game. I would say the positive for Etienne this week is they're going up against Green Bay and an offense that puts up plenty of points. They could be losing in this one, and that could mean more game time for Etienne if he's healthy and on the field, Brett.
Yeah, totally with you on that. I think that, obviously we'll monitor what's going on with his practice updates, but he seems like he's limited. And, he's been doing work on the side, and I think that that's the only real concern that I have as far as his availability. But if he's in there, like you're firing him right up.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so let's jump right into the next matchup here. Indianapolis travels down to Houston. Zach, battle of the running quarterbacks with Anthony Richardson going head-to-head against C.J. Stroud. Let's start out with the Colts. Looks like Jonathan Taylor is going to come back, practiced in full today. What do you think that actually means for Anthony Richardson's value here?
Well, it certainly can't be really worse than it's been with Richardson under center. What I will say on a serious note, though, when you look at the defense that they're going up against in Houston, it's on the road. It could be a little bit of a tougher game. I do think, though, having Jonathan Taylor there, of course, if he's healthy and playing, will help Richardson and kind of just ease the offense just a tiny bit. They haven't really been able to get that run game going. Trey Sermon and Goodson last week, like they figured their stuff out, but I feel like you kind of give Richardson that comfortable presence in the pocket, and I think the problem when it comes to Richardson is he just can't throw the ball. It's simple as that. Like that's the problem right now. Nothing about the running game or any, like he needs to figure out how to throw the ball. That's obviously a longer process than just a couple of weeks, Brett. And for that reason, it puts him out of like quarterback range and starting ability in redraft and considerations in some aspects in terms of dynasty, Brett. So that is a problem right now until he figures out really how to get things going. I don't know how confident I can be in a Michael Pittman or a Josh Downs. It just doesn't work out for me. If Richardson's starting, like I don't expect the world out of those couple of guys. And for those reasons, I mean, they're flex plays and really kind of risky ones.
I'm in on JT, and that's it. I think that this is a week where I'm very down on everybody else. I just think, listen, it's a very shaky offense right now. And the uncertainty of Anthony Richardson and a lot of people saying like he's going to be the starter, and we'll see by the end of next season whether or not he's still the starter. And listen, the criticism has been warranted. The upside is still there, and we've seen it. But we've also now sort of seen the downside of it. Inaccuracies, not being able to get himself going as far as the run game, not a lot of blocking that's being helped for him. This was one of the top lines in football, and they're not really playing like it. And so I think that there needs to be this much improvement on the offensive line to allow Anthony Richardson to be able to work with, time and space and let his guys get open. And it's kind of just causing a whole ruckus here with this team. So, yeah, Jonathan Taylor is my only first start. Richardson right now is a super flex option, a strong one because he can still use his legs, but he's a super flex option anyway. And then, yeah, I think that Pittman right now is a flex. Like, Zach, good job getting off the cliff and taking that dive, getting Michael Pittman. Even though that 1 week you kind of got a little bit nervous. Oh, here we go. Like, Pittman's going to have this huge upturn. Like, good job, you got out. I got great value for it. And the same thing goes for Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, and AD Mitchell as well.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so looking on the other side of the ball, we have the Texans. And Zach, I just think you're kind of starting everybody here. I'm probably not starting Dalton Schultz, but as far as Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, and mixing go along with CJ Stroud, I'm starting those guys.
Yeah, Brett, I think it's difficult to really, if you're a Tank Dell owner, to be confident after last week, but they'll right the ship. Obviously, the goose egg last week, and it's one thing to have a goose egg and just not get targeted and not even be looked at. He had 4 targets. He dropped the ball in the end zone. Like, he was getting those important targets. It just didn't come great that day, and it just wasn't his day in the end. And they relied more on the run game with Mixon to really carry that big load. I think when you look at the matchup against Indianapolis, it is really picture perfect. And I think when you look at that, it's hard to bench a guy like Tank Dell this week. It should be a good one for him.
All right, so let's jump into our next matchup here as we travel to Detroit, Michigan, as the Tennessee Titans take on the Detroit Lions. Zach, we got to start out with the Titans because they got Mason Rudolph playing quarterback this week. No Will Levis going, and obviously they don't have D-Hop there as well, as he's been shipped off. So do you see Calvin Ridley kind of being the guy here going forward, or no?
Yeah, I mean, he should be, but that doesn't always turn well when it comes to the Tennessee Titans. They just kind of have a name for wide receivers, and where they go to rot a little bit, Brett. They're becoming a bit of an NFL inside joke now. And it's just, that's the reality. I think when you look at this week, of course, Ridley's questionable right now, but obviously keep an eye on that. I think when you look at the matchup, like, it sets up very well. Like, he's going up against a very weak secondary in Detroit. And I think when you look at that, like, they should be throwing him the ball. However, they got to figure things out. And until he does that, I don't know if I like fully have trust in starting him, Brett. I just think when you look at the matchup, it looks good. Yes. However, Calvin Ridley owners, I don't know how they really completely trust him right now. It's kind of difficult to really trust anybody except Tony Pollard in this offense this year, Brett.
Yeah, he is the wide receiver 69 in fantasy points per game, and it's just been a horrible season for him and what was supposed to be this breakout year for him. Obviously, like the contract, that whole situation, whether or not he was going to sign elsewhere. And so, yeah, I think that, I'm going to pull up a tweet here that I saw. It's the Simpsons grandpa saying they had A.J. Brown, they had Derrick Henry, and DeAndre Hopkins on the team. And that has sort of been the running joke with the Titans, because it's just like, listen, they had so much talent going on there and just nothing, just absolutely nothing. They had Mike Vrabel as their coach and nothing. It's just, yeah, they became a running joke, like you said. That said, we move forward here, and Tony Pollard right now, I think, is the only guy that I'm actually starting here out of this line. I'm actually going to stay away this week from Calvin Ridley with Mason Rudolph there. I don't know. I don't know what is going to move the needle for this team. Thought there was a chance that Chigakonkwo got a little bit of an uptick, but I'm not sure I'm really confident in anybody outside of Tony Pollard here.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And then when you look at the other side in Detroit, simple. We say it every week. Start your guys. They're going to keep rolling. Obviously, Monty's a guy to keep an eye on, Brett. And that's pretty much it. I think you're rolling with your guys, and they get a good matchup against Tennessee. Just should be a light week for them at home.
Yeah, don't start Jameson Williams because he's not playing.
That's true.
All right, let's go to the next one here. Arizona at Miami. Let's jump actually to a viewer question before we jump into that one. Question here from Jordan. Thoughts on this trade? 12-man, full PPR, Jameson Williams. There you go, right into the JMO thing. For Dobbs. Zach, what are your thoughts here on Dobbs for JMO?
I love it, Brett. It's full PPR, redraft, 12-man. Like, Romeo Dobbs has proved himself the last couple of weeks to could be that second wide receiver and really that second pass catcher in the Green Bay offense, an offense that loves to throw the ball. They're always going to be throwing it. So you're not going to really have to worry too much about Dobbs. I really like that trade, Brett. You kind of get out at the right time, of course, with Jameson Williams and what's going on. But JMO's also in a crowded offense. He's not going to have his greatest week every week. That's not to say that Green Bay's offense isn't loaded, but I think there's more room for Romeo Doubs to excel in fantasy football than there is for JMO. I mean, just look at the two offenses, and I like that trade a lot. And I think Doubs is going to be a nice piece for the rest of the season.
Yeah, 10 targets last week for Doubs, and I think that that's really telling in an offense that's so crowded. So, yeah, I love it. I think that, I talked about it earlier in the show about JMO and how I kind of had to get off from the Dynasty Island because it just seemed like it wasn't going to work out. Obviously, now the suspension kind of ducks his value even lower. There's going to be people that are out there and say, okay, that's a hot offense and let's chase them. But boom or bust. Yeah, like you just said, boom or bust every week. And yeah, that's one of the things that I really hated about him too. And he never really was going to crack the lineup because it's almost that Gabe Davis sort of role there.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so now let's jump in. Thank you for the question. Let's jump into Arizona at Miami. Zach, Tua is back, and Tyreek Hill was the first guy to come out and say it. Put me in your lineup. Fire me up. He is probably the most excited. He said that he teared up watching Tua walk back on the field, and that just kind of shows what the struggle has been here for some of these receivers over the last few weeks.
Yeah, 100%, Brett. And Tyreek Hill jumps up boards all the way back into the top 5. I mean, where he should be with Tua on the field. And I think when you look at that, the advancement of a guy like Jalen Waddle as well, who's just been invisible without Tua. I think when you look at those two guys, those are the two that really this impacts the most. And they're excited to have him back. They get a really solid matchup against Arizona. They're at home. It's in Miami. And yes, Tua likes warm weather and everything in Miami. It's not really the warmest right now as we head towards the end of October, but it's warm enough that he'll be back. He'll be excelling at home. They'll figure things out. I think they could end up absolutely routing Arizona in this game. And I think a big part of it will be those two wide receivers. Of course, you add in Devon Achane, who's also going to be in the lineup too, Brett.
Yeah, Bo Callahan likes playing in the cold weather, but Tua loves playing in the warm weather. And that's just right about that. I think you fire all these guys up here. Jalen Waddle, as an owner of Jalen Waddle, I was ecstatic when I found out that Tua was going to play this game because it really is just going to right the ship here. I think that across all those guys, Waddle and Hill, Achane included in there, you're must starting all those guys. Mostert, I think, becomes an interesting option as well, with him being healthy now as probably a running back 3 range or a flex consideration, I would say, for him.
Yeah, 100%.
And then on the other side of the ball, listen, Kyler's a dog. Kyler is a dog. I think that he's put himself back into this quarterback 1 range. And so with the legs, quarterback 1, probably in the lower end, if we're being fair, just based on some of the struggles we've seen. But you're probably just starting him and set it and forget it. James Conner, you're playing him as well. Trey McBride, obviously, top end talent there. Marvin Harrison, he had a little bit of a struggle here, and we're watching this, kind of come to fruition here of teams honing in on trying to guard Marvin Harrison and him struggling a little bit. I think he gets through it. I think he's a flex option this week. But if you have him, you're putting him in there. You're not going to waste your second round pick by putting him on the bench.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you look at Marvin, it's just that he's not completely on the same page as Kyler right now, and it's something to figure out, the two of them. But yeah, you cannot bench him, and you're starting the rest of the guys in McBride and as well as James Conner this week. I think Kyler is kind of on the border, based on it's just a tough quarterback matchup against Miami. Miami's been really good. They're also at home. The defense will probably be fired up. Tua is back and everything. I think when you look at that, it could be one of the tougher weeks for Kyler Murray. So I'd look at some streaming options if you haven't already.
All right, let's jump right into our next matchup here. Zach, we talked a lot about the Buccaneers and the Falcons. We talked a lot about the Buccaneers from the top of the show as they take on the Falcons this week, 1:00. So we won't really spend too much time on them, but just quickly, like, are you starting Baker even with all these injuries?
I think maybe. It's kind of you kind of go both ways on it. I think when you look at the matchup, Brett, like, I mean, he went to town on this Atlanta defense the last time these two teams played. So from that standpoint, I look at it and say, all right, yeah, he's going to figure things out. And it's not to say that there aren't really weapons for him. Like, he still has plenty of guys without Godwin and Evans in the lineup. There's still plenty of guys that we mentioned before. Otten, McMillan, they got Rachaad White out of the backfield. He's got the run game. Baker also runs the ball a lot, especially this year. He's been moving the legs a lot more. So for that reason, all of those reasons, I still think he could be in redraft lineups, Brett, as a quarterback one. I just think based on the matchup and everything around it, he still could be the Baker Mayfield that we've seen in fantasy football throughout this season.
Yeah, I think that, listen, fantasy, quarterback 2 in points per game. With that said, I think that, the depth there and whether he can retool himself with Jalen McMillan, Sterling Shepard, and Trey Palmer, it's a real test for him. It just is. So, yeah, he's probably still quarterback 1, but probably more towards the lower end. I put him probably right where I would have put Kyler in that sort of range. Where you have him, yeah, you're probably rolling there anyway. But that said, I think the guys around him become a little more of a question mark here. Like I said, I think Rachaad White gets a boost here just based on the production from last week. I'm really not starting anybody else except for Cade Otton. Cade Otton, Rachaad White, Baker Mayfield. That's kind of it for me.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
All right, and then on the side of the ball, start your guys. Kyle Pitts looks like a stud. He looks like the guy that we thought he was going to be. And finally, the has sort of been, righted. And Kirk Cousins, in what was supposed to be a boom week, dudded and kind of finished in the low 20s as far as the quarterback. So that was sort of interesting. And you're kind of just putting him in that same sort of range where you got lower end quarterback 1 into the high end quarterback 2. For sure, starting him in super flex, maybe a little bit more of a question mark as far as goes, in one quarterback league. But yeah, Bijan, putting him out there, obviously. London, same thing. And then Darnell Mooney, I think, is a very good flex consideration as he has been every single week. As is Tyler here, who has still been able to figure out some sort of role within this offense.
Yeah, Brett, I don't think Kirk Cousins will throw for 500 yards again against Tampa Bay, but I do think he's going to have a really good week against Tampa Bay, like he did the last time. Obviously, this one on the road, but even so, like, they are going to go to town, and this offense has looked really good recently, Brett. They're bringing things together, bringing the run game in, bringing Bijan and getting him involved more. Like, everything about their offense is rolling right now, and I like really all of these guys in this matchup this week. A really, really good spot for all of them.
All right, Zach, let's jump to the next matchup here. Jets, they travel to Foxborough to take on the New England Patriots in what is a must-win for the New York Jets as they try to basically keep their season alive. I think it's still a little too early to do that. And, by the math, it looks like they got to go like 7-3 to put themselves right in that spot. But it's got to start with this one. This is a must win with a struggling Patriots team that can't really seem like they're going to be able to move the ball. So let's actually start with the Patriots. Drake May has looked very good early here in his career. I'm curious on what your thoughts are as far as, him as well as the receivers there.
Yeah, Brett, I mean, when you look at it, like, there's a lot going on. You were saying for the Jets to start off, yeah? Just making sure.
No, I start off with the Patriots. I think that it becomes a must win. But obviously, like Drake May, he's just been kind of on the rise. And so, Yeah, let's start off with them, and then we'll kind of work our way back to the Jets.
Yeah. All right. So, when you look at any of these guys, like it's hard to trust them. I would say. I think when you go up against the Jets defense, although yeah, George Pickens had a nice day last Sunday and kind of went to town on this Jets defense. It's hard to really trust a lot of these guys and putting them in any fantasy lineups. I think the only one that I'd really consider among the pass catchers would be a Hunter Henry. And at that point, he's more of like a low end tight end one, high end tight end two. He's just in that range. He's getting a lot of targets right now from May, which obviously typical young quarterback, rookie quarterback, just really trying to figure things out in this offense. I think he's the only one that I'd really look at among the pass catchers. And then after that, you got Ramondre Stevenson in the backfield. And when it comes to Ramondre, I think when you look at the matchup, you say, all right, well, some running backs have done really well against the Jets in the past. And just based on missed tackles and everything, it was a rough time the last time Ramondre went up against the Jets defense. So they're looking for better this time around. I do think they'll have a better performance. This one coming in New England, they're at home, and they'll kind of figure things out with those two guys. But after that, I'm really not going with anybody else, Brett.
Yeah, fair. That's probably just because they're not starting Javon Baker this week, it looks like, against the New York Jets. Listen, I think that outside of, the Ramondre Stevenson thing, you could probably put Drake May in the Superflex conversation now. He has been able to get it together a bit. And yeah, even in a tough matchup, I'm still kind of putting him in that slot. The only guy outside of Hunter Henry, as far as the pass catchers, like you said, that I would even consider is Demario Douglas. And he had what was a dud week last week, but I think that sort of was just an outlier. And he's kind of been there the entire season for them. Target share has been there. This is a game where the Jets, like I said, are trying to basically fight for their lives here. And so this could potentially be a game where the Patriots really need to throw the ball because they're down. Listen, these games are always very tightly contested. So I say that with tongue in cheek a little bit because, they're going to have to be able to run the ball as well. But that said, if they are down, like Demario Douglas is going to be the guy getting the ball, I think, a lot. Because Drake May has been able to push the ball down the field when he has to throw it. So Pop Douglas is there for me. I don't know that I can be confident, though, in anybody else there.
Yeah, definitely fair. And I'll bring it to the Jet side, Brett. Breece Hall is a must start, obvious. Then you got Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. Probably both of them must starts. I think when you look at that, it is a little bit difficult to look at the two of them after last week and be like, all right, well, is this really going to work out, Brett? I think they'll get it right this week. They're going up against New England, and we've seen what the Patriots defense has been this year. And it's just a really strong matchup for the Jets and a get right spot for a team that's kind of sputtered out of control in the last 4 weeks or so, Brett. And I look at that and say, all right, well, Aaron Rodgers in the Superflex conversation, I wouldn't put him anything higher than that. I just think there's better options on the board. But I do think overall, you look at the matchup against New England, it's pretty perfect when you look at it for this Jets offense. So start all those guys.
And I think it really just comes down to the trade that they made. Last time the Jets played against the Patriots, Christian Gonzalez followed around Garrett Wilson like a puppy dog. He was there on 89% of his routes, right on him. And Shepard's, that's probably not going to happen this week because obviously you got two studs in Devontae and Garrett Wilson. So I'm confident starting both of those guys. And I think that last week, listen, it didn't go the way that they want, but the things that I took out of it from the fantasy perspective, if you watch the game very early on in the game, it looked like Aaron Rodgers was trying to get Devontae going. And he did. He got his couple of balls early, his targets, I should say, early. And then it looked like he just kind of totally switched gears, and because Garrett Wilson just kind of kept getting open as the other team honed in on Devontae, as the Steelers kind of doubled, even tripled at times Devontae, it kind of found Garrett Wilson open. So Garrett Wilson, he ended up leading the Jets in target, and I think that could be a thing that continues here this week. That said, yeah, you're starting all those dudes. You know, and I think that this is a potential game that Tyler Conklin can actually, you know, work himself back into a potential fantasy spot where it seemed like, you know, last week it was like, okay, well, we can now drop him because he's not going to be able to compete with those two guys for targets. I think we kind of were like a little too early on that, and Conklin still can be a reckoning force here.
Yeah, definitely fair.
All right, Zach, so let's jump right to the next game here. The last of the 1:00 games, Philadelphia. They travel to Cincinnati. Zach, is T. Higgins the number one wide receiver in this offense? Because it sort of seemed like he played like it last week.
Yeah, I mean, I would not say so. I think he's more of, when you look at like possession type of wide receiver versus a deep threat. I think that's not to say that Ja'Marr Chase isn't a possession wide receiver. I just think there's more to Ja'Marr Chase's game, and they see the combination of both Chase and Higgins and say, all right, well, we could work with both of them on those specific roles that they want them. I think when you look at it, both of them are really, really strong options, both top 10 options this week against Philadelphia, who, yes, they looked really good against Malik Neighbors last week, but that was pretty much against one wide receiver and a bad offensive line. Now they go up against a pretty powerhouse offense in Cincinnati on the road. And I think both of these guys, you got to fire them up for this week. And you're obviously starting Joe Burrow as well. A great matchup for him. And then when you look at the running back room, we've kind of gone back and forth each and every week. Brett, I would say when you look at both of these guys, like it's tough to tell in the end, but I would say Chase Brown probably gets the edge in my mind as more of a flex play than Zach Moss. Philly's front has been back and forth this year. I would trust Chase Brown more than Zach Moss in the end. Although, like, I think this game's going to be a lot more about passing and figuring things out when it comes to Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, and T. Higgins. I think they'll roll that way on their home field.
Yeah, I'm with you. I kind of go back and forth on the running backs, and it's sort of been this weekly conversation of which one to start. I think they're both startable. I think that Chase Brown has the higher upside than Zach Moss, where I'd probably put him just a hair above. But yeah, they're kind of just neck and neck. Sort of has been that way all season. You're kind of rolling out everybody else there. And, you know, I think that right now Iosivas becomes almost a drop candidate because I think he hasn't really been able to get the ball to the way that he did in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, 100%.
And then on the Eagles side of the ball, start your guys. I mean, Devonta and A.J. Brown, you're obviously rolling them out. Saquon and Jalen Hurts. Go monitor the reports on Dallas Goedert. He missed practice again today, and so not looking great for him. And obviously there is always tomorrow, but not a good sign for Dallas Goedert as he's sort of just been in this injury-riddled season here.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just kind of going back and forth of health-wise for Goddard. But other than that, yeah, you're starting your guys and rolling with them this week. It is a bit of a solid matchup for this Philadelphia offense that I expect the wide receivers to get back on track. Jalen Hurts only had 14 pass attempts last week, Brett. I think it's going to be a lot more than that. He's on the road in Cincinnati. They could be trailing, they could be winning. They're going to be throwing the ball in this one.
All right, Zach, so let's jump right to the next matchup. Spencer Rattler travels into Los Angeles as the Saints take on the LA Chargers at 4:00. Let's start out with the Saints. I think that Rattler is probably a super option in this one, but outside of Kamara, I'm not sure how many other guys we could start do we have the status of Olave here?
I think he's probably still questionable and figuring things out. But even in that range, like I don't know how healthy he would be. It's going to be hard. But like if he's playing, like I don't know, you gotta kind of pick based on options on your bench. I think when you look at some options that you may have, you may prefer it to this week. The Chargers defense, Brett, is like top of the radar for me. I think I had picked them up in almost all of my leagues. Just because this is a beautiful matchup for Los Angeles. They're at home and they're going up against Spencer Rattler and this offense that looked pretty terrible on Thursday night last week against Denver. Other than Kamara, I don't know if I'm really going with anybody in that New Orleans offense. And you just kind of have to roll with the LA guys, your Dobbins of the world. You also got a guy like Alad McConkey, who's a flex play and been playing well recently. Herbert's a super flex option. And I would say that's pretty much it. I don't think I'm missing anybody else.
No, I agree. I think that, you kind of nailed them all. And just an update here on Olave. He did practice in full today. So still has to gain clearance from an independent neurologist. But, good news, at least from that side of it. For me on the Chargers side, you're starting Dobbins there. Herbert's still a super flex option and nothing more. And then I'm stashing Kamani Vidal if he's out there in your league. I think that the upside sort of has proven to be true here for Kamani Vidal. I don't know that, obviously like he's a player that's been talked about a ton in Dynasty. Haven't really been able to use him in the redraft. I'm kind of just stashing him for now. And then listen, I think that Josh Palmer actually becomes some sort of an option here in some of those more desperate leagues here. Palmer's been running around on, as the route share and target share. He's been pretty good. And I think that this is some sneaky flex appeal just because the Saints have been gashed quite a bit. I think that they're going to try to focus in on the run. That could open up some routes here for Palmer.
Yeah, definitely fair.
All right, so let's jump to the next one. Washington, they host Chicago. Zach, let's start out with the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams here.
Yeah, Brett, and obviously the story on the other side, of course, Jaden Daniels, and we'll get to that in a second. I think when it comes to this game, though, like it's kind of prove your point in terms of Caleb Williams. They'll be fired up for this one and ready to go. And it's a really solid matchup here. I would probably put him in the range of high-end quarterback 2. I don't know if I'd entirely put him in that quarterback 1 or low-end quarterback 1 range. I think it's a really good matchup, but there could also be some other streaming options that you'd prefer, maybe a Bo Nix of the world who may have a better matchup. But I think in Superflex, obviously, Caleb is in your lineup. And then it comes down to just starting the main guys of Swift and DJ Moore. The rest of the guys, when it comes to Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, all flex plays as they really always are. Yes, it could be a better matchup this week for those two guys, but they just haven't proved enough throughout this season for me to trust them in my lineup just yet. And then another guy to definitely put on the radar is Cole Kmet, who has been really, really strong. He's also in a high-end tight end 2 range. But a lot of guys, we don't really have any bye weeks this week, Brett. And for that reason, all tight ends are really available.
Yeah, I agree on all of that. There's really nothing to add. As far as the Commander side of things, it really just comes down to what is the status of Jaden Daniels. If Jaden Daniels is playing, Terry McLaurin becomes must start, wide receiver 1. And I just think like the 2 running backs are right now, you're playing B-Rob, and then I'd probably put Austin Eckler more in that flex range, but you're playing him as well just because of the impact. If Jaden Daniels is not playing and it is Marcus Mariota, I'm a little bit more tempered on my expectations for Terry McLaurin, and I'm a little bit higher on the 2 running back there B-Rob, and an Eckler.
Yeah, that's fair. I would say B-Rob's kind of pretty automatic for me, no matter what's going on. Like with Daniels, yes, it creates room in the run game, but B-Rob's been pretty consistent when it comes to like getting into the end zone and just breaking through a lot of pressure on him. There will be a lot of pressure on him if Daniel doesn't play and obviously in that run game, but he's been pretty matchup proof when it comes to that. So I wouldn't be too worried about him. McLaurin is a question. I will say with how he looked last week, and yes, it's Carolina, so got to temper it a little bit. I mean, Marcus Mariota was getting the ball to Terry McLaurin, and he was throwing deep balls downfield. He was figuring things out with him. And for those reasons, I would temper expectations, but I would also feel just a little bit confident enough to still obviously put him in my lineup and put him as a flex play, Brett.
Completely agree. Zach, let's jump to the next matchup here. Buffalo at Seattle. We'll start out with the Bills. Josh Allen, obviously, like you're playing him. I think you're playing Cook, obviously. Amari Cooper's been really good. And I think that Keon Coleman actually, here's the thing with this Amari Cooper trade. I think Keon Coleman actually has gotten a boost here a little bit just based on that. I think that in the same way we talked about Garrett Wilson, kind of getting that from Devontae, attention's kind of going to go to Amari Cooper, especially after he scores a touchdown. And Keon Coleman, you saw that video of him kind of showing him the route. Here's where they want you to go. And then he goes and he does it and scores the touchdown. So I think Keon Coleman actually gets a good boost here, and I'm playing him this week. Khalil Shakir right now, he's a flex option, and then Dalton Kincaid, tight end 1.
Yeah, 100% on all fronts, Brett. I do think that Keon Coleman definitely got a boost with Amari Cooper coming in. Just leads to more avenues and not as much pressure on him. And yeah, it's interesting right now, and just figuring things out. Keon Coleman looked really, really good last week. So a lot of positives heading into this matchup against Seattle, who's definitely struggled on defense so far this year. Brett, I'll bring it to the other side with Seattle. And I mean, Kenneth Walker is obviously in your lineup. And then you have DK Metcalf, who may not play in this one, Brett. Obviously carted off last week, and I don't think he's practiced just yet this week, and something to keep an eye on. It looks like he's probably not going to go. I don't know how confident I would feel in a Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think I'm kind of picking and choosing based on options. It's just a tough offense to look at matched up against this Buffalo defense. Buffalo's defense has definitely improved as the year has gone on. Could be a bit of a tougher matchup in the end, but Kenneth Walker is definitely locked in. I'm kind of iffy on some other guys though, Brett.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think JSN's probably a flex option here. I'm probably out on Lockett, even with the potential that DK doesn't go. Jake Bobo is going to end up getting some reps here. We'll obviously see the Jake Bobo crew come in, and he'll be added, I'm sure, in a bunch of leagues in the next week or so, but I'm not sure the impact that it's going to be there. And therefore, I think that with Geno, you're probably putting him right on the borderline, and he's probably more super option, or it kind of just depends on what your situation is.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so let's jump to the next matchup here. Carolina at Denver. Zach, we had some interesting news come about just a few days ago. There was an unfortunate car accident. Thankfully, Andy Dalton and his family are okay, but it does mean Bryce Young is going to be the starter for at least this week. How do you think that affects the offense here?
It completely affects it, and I don't know if I feel confident really starting anybody. I would say probably Chuba Hubbard is the only one that I would say, all right, well, based on consistency, like he's good enough to be a flex option or a low-end RB2. That's it, Brett. I cannot trust any of these pass catchers. I can't trust this offensive line. They're going up against Denver, who's been arguably the top defense in football so far this year. And for that reason, I'm just staying away. And Chuba Hubbard's, like I said, the only one that's on my radar this week for Carolina.
Yeah, Deontay Johnson banged up right now, missed another practice today, and so we'll monitor his report in the next day and see if he actually can go. But yeah, like you said, I'm kind of staying away from everybody in this offense. Maybe Adam Thielen becomes a potential option if he does in fact play in one of those deep desperation leagues. But yeah, Chuba Hubbard's the only like sure starter here.
Yeah, 100%.
And then on the other side of the ball, we have Bo Nix. And I think Bo Nix has pretty much proven himself to be a very good super flex option here. So I'm rolling him out. Javonte, you're rolling him out as well. Cortland Sutton, I think, is a good option here as well. And then Troy Franklin's probably a flex option here, but certainly a consideration as we sort of saw them come together. Bo Nix and Troy Franklin. It is a partnership that I think could be very good going forward here.
Yeah, 100% agree on all fronts. And I mean, the best matchup that they could possibly get against Carolina this week. So expecting a lot of points from a Denver offense that last week, put up 33 total against New Orleans on the road. So definitely feeling very confident about all those guys heading into this week.
All right, so let's jump into our next matchup here. The last game of the 4 o'clock window. Kansas City, they're going to take on Las Vegas. Zach, these two teams, I feel like every time that they play against each other, it is just an absolute brawl between the Chiefs offense and the Raiders defense. Those two units like absolutely hate each other, and it's so much fun to watch. So this is actually a game that I look forward to quite often. Patrick Mahomes right now has been quite a struggle, though. And so now obviously they bring in D-Hop. Do you think Mahomes kind of is able to, let's say, settle himself and get back into the consistent 20 points for each week?
He could, but then there's also the positive of how in the end Vegas has been so far this year, and they could really just rely on a Kareem Hunt to get him over the line. Of course, Hunt was questionable. Now he practiced fully. He's off the injury report. So, like, that's a good sign. I think when you look at that, like, they can rely on him. Yes, they can rely on guys like Kelsey, but I don't know if all of a sudden from this week it'll be Mahomes is back into that category. I need to see a couple weeks at a time, obviously, and see how that's really going and just some consistency from Patrick Mahomes. And until that happens, I don't know if I can confidently be throwing him in there. Of course, he's a super flex quarterback. He will never not be for the rest of his career. When you look at redraft, though, yeah, there's better options on the board and better matchups this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's a super flex option, but I don't know that I'm starting him this week. And like I said, like tough defense, these teams absolutely hate each other, those two units. And so, yeah, they could just try to beat them with Kareem Hunt. So Kareem Hunt is a must start for me. Travis Kelce obviously is a must start as well. But yeah, like you said, I'm kind of just staying away from everybody else there. D-Hop, even if he plays, I don't know how many snaps he's actually going to get. So I'm staying away from him this week. But like I said, like season long, I think D-Hop becomes an intriguing option here moving forward.
Yeah, 100%.
Then on the other side of the ball, the Raiders, Brock Bowers. And that's kind of it. I see Alexander Mattison appeal, but I'm just not sure about it. I'm a little unsure. Somebody's going to have to get the ball. And so, will that be Alexander Mattison? Sure, it could be. I also know that the Chiefs' defensive front is really good. And that to me is what kind of scares me as far as the run goes. And so I'm not really starting Madison. I know he's a flex consideration though. But I'm not going to put him in the lineup.
100%. Exactly what I was going to say. I think it's based on matchup here, and the Chiefs front has been really strong this year. They are really strong in general. not trustworthy enough just yet, Madison, to put him in a lineup against a tough defense like that. It's Brock Bowers, and that's it for me.
All right, so let's jump into Sunday Night Football. Dallas takes on San Francisco. Another big-time matchup here. And, Zach, let's start out with the Cowboys. Dak Prescott hasn't really looked like himself over the last bunch of weeks here. And for me, I'm probably sitting him in this matchup.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. And it's a tough matchup against San Francisco, who just cannot seem to find a break this season. They have really struggled and sputtered out of control, a team that we consider a Super Bowl contender each and every year. Brett, I think when you look at Dallas, though, yeah, it's hard to start Dak in a matchup like this. And I definitely would go with other options. After that, of course, CD's in your lineup. Of course, Ferguson's in your lineup. I think when you look at the run game, you're probably Dowdle is in that range and going to be a flex option for you. He's right on, I would say, the border of it. But I think when you look at this offense overall, it's a tough week for them. So I think it's going to take a little bit out of the fantasy upside from a lot of these guys. I do think like Jalen Tolbert, who has been the number 2 option, and Dallas obviously coming off a bye week, is somebody to just keep an eye on. I wouldn't be completely starting him this week because I think just the tough matchup against San Francisco, but definitely for future weeks, just a guy that he's going to get his targets as long as Brandon Cooks is out of the lineup.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that it's an intriguing option. You're starting Ferguson, you're starting CD, Rico Dowdle, he's in your lineup. Like I said, Dak's probably a super flex, so I'm not like completely benching him in all formats. But I'm certainly benching him in one quarterback leagues. I don't know that there's much of anything. And then Zeke is just an interesting case because it's like, yeah, he fills in here and there, but this is Rico Dowdle's backfield. And he is the more upside guy. So I'm benching Zeke here going forward. On the 49ers side of the ball, George Kittle and Deebo Samuel both practiced in limited fashion today with the foot, and Deebo with pneumonia, and also they added a wrist to that one. So monitor the reports, but if they're going, you're playing both of them. Brock Purdy in what could be a shootout, but could also end up being a really, really close, tough-minded game. I would say Brock Purdy is the quarterback 1/2, probably in that lower end. You're starting him in super flex, but you kind of have to make a decision here in the one quarterback league. I'll be starting him on my team just based on my situation. And then I would say Jordan Mason, fire him up.
Yeah, 100%. And it really just all comes down to health for a lot of these guys. And when it comes to Purdy's situation, yeah, a tough one based on weapons. I think if Juwan Johnson does play, Brett, oh my goodness. What we saw when they weren't with some of those top guys in the lineup. Imagine now that Brandon Ayuk is out and Jawan Jennings slots in as the wide receiver 2. He could really step up this week if he plays. He's questionable right now, but something to keep an eye on. If he does play, I think we could have a very big Jawan Jennings week once again.
Yeah, I agree. I think also Ricky Pearsall, depending on who plays, like he can end up being in there where he's the wide receiver 1. But if everybody plays, he's the wide receiver 4. Like it's so interesting. Or the 4th option, I should say, with Kittle. It's so interesting as far as the the outcomes for a guy like a Pearsall. So certainly monitor what's happening over the next 24 hours. As we start to get these reports of end of week and whether guys are active or questionable before you make your decision. Though it is the nighttime game. And so I think that I sort of hold the risk there where you kind of have to figure out, okay, well, if this guy might not play, maybe I don't want to wait till 4 o'clock on Sunday to find out, or 6 o'clock on Sunday to find out whether this guy's actually going to play or not.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so jumping to our final matchup here, the Giants taking on the Steelers. Zach, the Steelers manhandled the Jets. Do you think that with Russell Wilson at the helm, they could do the same here to the Giants?
Yeah, I think when you look at the Steelers offense, they were really strong last week. I would fire up both of Najee Harris and George Pickens in my lineup. And yes, Najee has a bit of a tougher look when it comes to the Giants front. However, when you watch Saquon Barkley last weekend, it didn't seem like their front was that strong in the end. So I think when you look at Najee Harris, he's in your lineup, and George Pickens as well. I would say Pat Freiermuth is still in that tight end range, of course, based on whether it's injuries or something going on. Like, he's always a solid option to look at. After that, Brett, I don't know if there's really anybody that I'm looking at. I would say that Russell Wilson is a super flex option. But that's pretty much it after that. Those three guys, when it comes to Wilson, Pickens, and Harris, is what I'm going with.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Freiermuth is that lower tier flex or low end tight end one, only because I think that the Giants have not been able to get out on the tight ends, and so he's a potential option there. But like you said, I'm rolling with all the rest of those guys. On the Giants side of things, listen, I think that Daniel Jones is still a super flex option. He certainly is not a quarterback one by any means, but I think that he's proven that he can use legs when he needs to. That propels him in the super flex range. For me, he's had some pretty good outputs this year. The running back situation is interesting as far as Tracy versus Singletary. Singletary got more of the snaps, but Tracy got more of the production. And so I would say that Tyrone Tracy is more of the flex option than Devin Singletary, but they are playing against the Steelers, so I'm a little bit more cautious where I probably won't be playing Tracy. But if I had to pick one, it would be Tracy over Singletary. As far as the receivers go, Malik Neighbors, obviously you're playing him in there. Wan'Dale Robinson, I think, is a flex option for me, and I'm staying away from Slayton and Hyatt as well as the two tight ends.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And I think really the only option that I truly feel confident with this week and when it comes to this offense is Malik Neighbors. Going to try and figure out how to get him the ball. But Pittsburgh's defense, obviously, we know how talented they are. A really strong group, and should not be an easy one going on the road for the Giants on Monday night.
All right, so let's head into the final stretch here. Our lock of the week. Zach, these are guys that we are going to start in our lineup that are outside the top 20 consensus rankings. Last week, it was Marvin Harrison Jr. taking on Devonta Smith, and I took it. So that puts me up in the standings. Sort of weird being in the lead this late in the season in lock of the week. Usually, you are way ahead in this. So I'm going to go with the first pick here, and I'm taking Jalen Waddle. Zach, like I said, Waddle is on my team. I am go this one. I just think with Tua back, it's going to just totally right the ship for all these guys. And so, obviously Tyreek, you're putting him way up in the rankings there, but Jalen Waddle for me, certainly a very good flex option here.
Yeah, definitely fair. I agree with you, and I'll go with Darnell Mooney, and it's based on matchup for me. Plus the fact that he's also been one of Kirk Cousins' go-to guys in this offense and has gotten a good target share behind Drake London. Brett, I think when you look at this offense, like the production that they had against Tampa the last time out, yes, I said it before, Kirk Cousins is not going to throw for 500 yards. I would be pretty shocked if he did, but I still think Darnell Mooney, who was very productive last time out versus Tampa with 2 touchdowns, is going to get his looks and going to put up some good fantasy points. So he's my lock of the week. Definitely plug him in your lineup if you have him on your bench this week.
Yeah, certainly fair. And I just love watching Darnell Mooney play. And it's just sort of changed from going to Chicago to a system like this where he doesn't have to be the guy. and sort of what that does for him. Jump into ones to watch, my absolute favorite segment that we do here each and every week. These are guys who are owned in 50% or less in the leagues and will be a waiver target next week. It's tied 3-3 in the standings, and I had a big dud last week. Taking Juju Smith-Schuster, who finished with 0. To your Jerry Jeudy, who finished with 2.8. Zach, so you get first pick here.
Yeah, it was a bit of a slugfest down there, Brett, for both of these guys, and not too many points. So we're both looking to bounce back here. I'm going to go with Rashad Bateman, Brett, who's only owned in 42% of leagues right now. I think when you look at Bateman and his production in this offense, yeah, it came last week against Tampa Bay, where he's getting some deep balls now, Brett, and a different side that we've seen from Rashad Bateman this year. And I think he's definitely solidified himself as the wide receiver 2 on Baltimore. But I also think that the Ravens know that they can't always rely on Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson and their legs. They have to throw the ball a fair amount. And Lamar threw 5 touchdowns last week. Rashad Bateman going to be on the end of some of those this year. Definitely a guy to look out for this week.
Yeah, and I mean, just as far as the Juju thing goes, like it's really tough to predict injuries, and obviously he went down with the injury in the middle of the game, wasn't targeted before that. So, while it is a loss in the standings here, I'm not really gonna here. We're gonna go right forward. And this week I'm taking Jalen McMillan, who's owned in 44% of leagues, and he was owned in 1% of leagues heading into yesterday's waiver frenzy. Gets added in 43% of leagues, which we found kind of funny, but he's still out there in a ton of leagues. And so if he is available in your league, I think it's a guy you have to go take a chance on, because I think, listen, as far as the Goddard news goes out for the season, like somebody's going to have to ride shotgun to Mike Evans. And the fact that Mike Evans might not be there this week, somebody's going to have to be the number 1 receiver. I think that them playing McMillan in the slot, like I said, should open up some really good routes for him. And obviously the way he dominated in college, like I'm riding full on Jalen McMillan. Didn't start him this week, but he's certainly a stash candidate, because I think he's going to have a pretty good output.
Yeah, definitely fair, Brett, and definitely a guy to keep an eye on, and should be by the end of this week into next week over 50%.
All right, Zach, so that'll do it as we head into week 8. We'll be back at it next week for week 9. And I mean, World Series here coming up. And big shout out to our New York Yankees here. I just had to give one, mission to 28, man.
Yeah, I mean, exciting time for you and I. Obviously, big Yankee fans here in New York. I wish our football teams here in New York were doing a bit better, but that's a different story right now. But always keeping our head up here in New York.
Yeah, it's not great when it feels like football season's over and baseball season is still going on. But yeah, let's go Yankees, and hope they can get it on here. Please subscribe to the YouTube podcast. Give us the thumbs up. And in the words of Aaron Rodgers, the night is darkest before the dawn. We shall rise yet again here on the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malamud and Zach Malamud. Catch you on the next one.